They say silence is peace, but for me, silence was a prison I built with trembling hands. Each word I never spoke became another brick, sealing me away from a world that wanted to claim me, own me, define me. For 8 years, I hid behind that quiet, a fragile and sacred illusion that no one dared to touch. But destiny has a cruel sense of patience. It waited for me in the shadows of the Crossroads district, wearing the scent of rain and dominance. It had eyes the color of storms, and a voice that didn't need to be raised to command obedience. And when he looked at me, really looked, I knew my silence was already dead. Because some fates don't arrive with thunder, they arrive quietly, in the shape of a man who was never meant to be defied. I had cultivated my silence like a delicate, necessary poison. For 8 long years, the sound of my own voice had been a ghost I refused to summon. My survival, my carefully constructed freedom from the burdensome obligations of the mate bond system, rested entirely on the quiet, expressive movements of my hands. I was an anomaly, an omega who had managed to slip through the tightly woven net of societal expectation and biological imperative, all by feigning a deep, debilitating muteness. The Crossroads district, a sprawling, anonymous urban hub where wolf and human life bled together, was my sanctuary, the perfect place for a highly valuable omega to gain anonymity and avoid detection. I remember the day the atmosphere changed. It wasn't just the scent of ozone and raw power. It was the heavy, suffocating weight of unquestioning authority settling over the neighborhood. I was shelving supplies in the small, dusty apothecary where I worked when he walked in. The sheer, imposing size of him dominated the narrow aisle, eclipsing the weak afternoon light. This was Marcus Julian Sterling, de 35 Anos, the Alpha King, here for a routine territorial review encounter that was anything but routine when he was involved. His presence was not just imposing, it was seismic, shaking the very foundation of my fragile existence. He stopped directly in front of me, his sharp, scrutinizing gray eyes pinning me like a specimen in a lab. I felt the powerful, primal tug, the mate bond hitting me like a physical blow, but I forced my expression into blank, resilient neutrality, the practiced look of someone accustomed to pity. Instinctively, I reached for the mute sigil, a worn silver pendant I habitually touched, my psychological shield against potential claimants. I quickly executed a polite, generic gesture of apology for blocking his path, my hands moving with deliberate, stylized grace. Marcus Julian Sterling did not move. He studied my hands, then my face, lingering on my highly expressive, frightened hazel eyes. His instincts, I knew, were peerless. His suspicion, legendary. "You are an elusive creature." His voice was a deep, resonating rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and directly into my chest. I offered a slight, nervous smile, signing with careful precision, "I apologize. I am unable to speak." His gaze intensified, turning the suspicion into a tangible, dangerous heat. He didn't accept inability. He didn't retreat. He began a calculated, terrifying pursuit. He didn't treat me like a disability case. He treated me like a complex lock he was determined to pick. Every day for the next week, he returned to the Crossroads district. He observed me from a distance, then cornered me in quiet corridors, asking nonverbal questions, watching my reactions, my involuntary flinches, the subtle shifts in my posture. I, Sarah Evelyn Vance, de 26 Anos, maintained my silent discipline. I was a master of deception, my communication refined to only the necessary gestures, precise, deliberate movements designed to reinforce the belief in my muteness. My anxiety was a perpetual, throbbing drumbeat beneath my ribs, the fear that this relentless, suspicious male would tear through the veneer and discover the dangerous truth. He made it clear he was intrigued by the resolute silence, yet his alpha instincts whispered that something was profoundly deceptive about my demeanor. "I find your silence highly suspicious, little one," he signed one afternoon, mocking my only means of communication with an exaggerated, slow gesture. I merely offered a small, patient shake of my head, touching the mute sigil once more, pretending that my inability caused me genuine sorrow. He watched the movement of my fingers, his powerful brow furrowed, his possessiveness growing in inverse proportion to my transparency. The mounting pressure felt like a physical weight, pushing me closer to the edge of revelation. I knew the moment the truth came out, my life would be forfeit to the mate bond system, and specifically, to this powerful, uncompromising male. I had lived nearly a decade protecting my freedom, and I couldn't afford a single slip. The breaking point, the truth's desperate utterance, came not in a quiet, confined space, but amidst chaos. The territorial review encounter, meant to be orderly, was disrupted late one evening. A group of low-level rogues, agitated by the unusual presence of the Alpha King in the neutral territory, caused a localized skirmish near the fringes of the marketplace. The sudden confusion separated Marcus from his main guard detail. We were walking back toward his temporary secure lodgings when two particularly aggressive feral shifters, who clearly hadn't recognized the king in the low light and sudden disorder, spotted us. They saw only an unchallenged male and a highly sought-after Omega. They cornered us against the brick wall of a deserted warehouse. Marcus reacted instantly, a terrifying, controlled explosion of muscle and honed instinct. He took down the first rogue with a brutal economy of movement, but the second male, younger and driven purely by desperation and adrenaline, managed to flank him while he was preoccupied, raising a jagged piece of market debris, a length of broken rebar, as a makeshift weapon, aiming directly at Marcus' unprotected temple. Time dissolved. The cold dread that seized me was unlike any fear I had ever known. It wasn't the fear of being claimed. It was the sudden, shattering realization that if he fell, the entire fragile balance of the realm would be thrown into chaos. My carefully constructed 8-year silence, my shield, my defense, my entire existence, shattered in one desperate, primal explosion. It wasn't a planned word. It was a raw, rusty sound ripped from the deepest, most terrified place in my soul. The sound was thin, rusty, and shockingly loud in the sudden quiet that followed the impact of Marcus' fist against the debris, sending the rebar clattering uselessly to the ground. The rogue collapsed, unconscious. Marcus, breathing heavily, rigid with coiled power, didn't even spare a glance for the downed enemy. He turned his head slowly, excruciatingly toward me. His sharp gray eyes, previously burning with battle fury, now held a terrifying, cold stillness that cut deeper than any blade. The world seemed to tilt violently. The lie was out. I stood there trembling, immediately covering my mouth with shaking hands, the phantom sound of my own voice echoing, mocking me. "You spoke," Marcus stated, his voice dangerously low, stripped of all warmth. It wasn't a question demanding confirmation. It was a judgment. 8 years, little Omega. You signed, you gestured, you wore that pitiful sigil. He nodded toward the pendant dangling forgotten on my chest. And all the while, you had a voice. My guarded, resilient exterior crumbled immediately. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't form another word, not even a ragged gasp. I tried desperately to sign an apology, a pathetic plea for understanding, but he grabbed my hands, his grip firm and unforgiving, silencing the movement instantly. Why? The question was laced with the sting of betrayal, yet underneath the fury, a dark, consuming, uncompromising possessiveness flared to life in his eyes. He didn't need the answer signed. He already understood. The highly valuable Omega, hiding from the obligations, avoiding the political scrutiny, dodging the inevitable claim of the mate bond system. She had lied for nearly a decade to avoid her destiny. "You feared the claim," he observed, his thumb tracing the soft skin of my wrist, a marking, a claiming touch. "You lied to avoid being found, to avoid me." The full realization hit him, the depth of the deception, the scope of the resistance. I was his Omega, and I had utilized every ounce of my cunning and fear to fight tooth and nail against destiny itself. The fury in his expression was now mixed with an intense, triumphant clarity. "The silence ends now, Sarah Evelyn Vance," he commanded, his alpha aura swelling instantly until I was dizzy with submission, every fiber of my being recognizing his absolute dominance. "You ran from me in silence, but you will be claimed with the voice of fate ringing in your ears." He didn't wait for a response, didn't allow for a protest or a pathetic excuse. The raw, possessive instinct overwhelmed any residual political calculation. He pulled me against his solid, powerful chest, marking me with his scent, a deep, dominating rumble resonating in his throat. "Mine," he growled, the single word heavy with finality, settling the matter for all time. My resistance, the carefully built walls of my anxiety and fear, evaporated under the sheer weight of his demand. The lie was over. The silence was broken. I had escaped the mate bond system for 8 years, but in the end, my desperate voice had betrayed me directly into the hands of the most powerful male in the realm. As he lifted me effortlessly, carrying me away from the darkness of the Crossroads district and toward the imposing, undeniable authority of Ethelgard Keep, I realized that my life had just irrevocably shifted. I had gained my voice back only to lose my freedom. Claimed by the king who would tolerate neither deception nor defiance, my destiny had found me, shattering the quiet life I had fought so hard to maintain, forcing me into a future where the only sound was the fierce, demanding echo of his possessive, absolute claim. There would be no more pretending. The sensation of being hauled against Marcus' chest was overwhelming. A strange, brutal mixture of safety and utter terror. My body recognized the dominant force of his alpha nature and yearned to submit, while my mind, fueled by 8 years of carefully nurtured independence, screamed in protest. The rhythmic, powerful pounding of his heart beneath my ear was the drumbeat of my captivity. We moved fast, a dark, unstoppable shadow cutting through the remaining chaos of the Crossroads district. The smell of dust, rogue musk, and adrenaline gave way to the sharp, clean scent of the open road, and beneath it all, the overwhelming, potent aroma of Marcus, cedar, ozone, and pure, unquestioning authority. He held me without tenderness, his grip steel around my waist and back. I was a captured prize, an inconvenient secret that had finally revealed itself. The lie had felt like a suffocating blanket, but now that it was ripped away, the cold reality of my situation was far more chilling. I had traded anonymity for visibility, anonymity for ownership. The air between us was thick and sharp, heavy with his unspoken fury. He hadn't uttered another word since the possessive growl of mine, and his silence was more terrifying than any roar. I risked a glance up at his profile. His jaw was clenched tight, his scrutinizing gray eyes fixed straight ahead, radiating a lethal concentration that made my breath catch in my throat. He wasn't just angry, he was betrayed. He had been playing a game of subtle psychological warfare with a mute woman, only to find that the very foundation of her existence, her silence, was an elaborate, calculating deception aimed specifically at thwarting him. The journey felt endless. The sprawling, messy urban environment of the district, my sanctuary, vanished behind us, replaced by the deep, silent shadows of the high road leading toward the heart of the realm's power. The physical space we traversed mirrored the shift in my destiny, from the fringes to the center, from anonymity to being held by the Alpha King himself. When the massive black silhouette of Ethelgard Keep finally materialized against the bruised pre-dawn sky, my internal anxiety spiked, threatening to break me all over again. The keep was not merely a building. It was the stone manifestation of the mate bond system, the ultimate symbol of the power I had spent nearly a decade running from. Its imposing Gothic architecture loomed, cold and absolute, reflecting the dominance of its ruler. Marcus finally set me down in a cavernous chamber that smelled faintly of old leather and political gravity. It was a private study, high in a tower, with windows overlooking the entire sprawling city we had just left. The room was heavy, ornate, and utterly inescapable. My legs felt unstable, shaky from the adrenaline and the sudden return of my voice. I wrapped my arms around myself, instinctively reaching for the mute sigil, but my hand hesitated before touching the silver pendant. The charm felt mocking now, a relic of a failed defense. Marcus didn't approach me immediately. He walked toward a heavy, dark wood desk, placing his hands flat on the polished surface, leaning in until his imposing height seemed to stretch the very limits of the room. He didn't need to shift or shout. The sheer magnitude of his authority filled the space. "Sit," he commanded, the words slicing through the silence. I sank onto the nearest chair, my gaze locked on the rich, dark grain of the wood floor. I couldn't meet those eyes. Not yet. Not when I knew the condemnation I would find there. "We are past the pleasantries, Sarah," he began, his voice still low, dangerously steady. "I know what you are, a highly valuable Omega. I suspected from the first moment in that apothecary that your silence was highly improbable, but I did not suspect the depth of the calculation." He pushed off the desk and began to pace slowly, each footfall echoing the relentless, searching quality of his mind. 8 years, he repeated, the time frame sounding like an immense, unforgivable insult. 8 years you played this part. You used those precise, stylized gestures. You wore that pitiful scrap of metal. You allowed every single person who encountered you to believe you were disabled. He stopped directly in front of me, forcing me to tilt my head back to look at him. For what? To avoid the political scrutiny? To avoid the obligations of the bond? Or, specifically, he leaned down, his scent enveloping me, demanding a visceral response. To avoid me? The possessiveness, even wrapped in fury, was palpable. It demanded honesty. My lips trembled, tasting the rusty echo of my single word of warning. I needed freedom, I managed, the word a ragged whisper, strained and foreign in my throat. It felt clumsy, inadequate after so long spent communicating through refined silence. Marcus straightened, his expression hardening. "Freedom is a luxury Omegas of your caliber do not possess in a world governed by the mate bond system. That is the biological and societal structure. You understood the rules, yet you chose to live a deliberate, continuous lie against the very fabric of our society." "I chose life without a political leash," I retorted, finding a sudden, shaky flicker of the resilience that had sustained me for nearly a decade. Being a valuable Omega means being a commodity, a bargaining chip. I wanted to choose my own path, Marcus. not be forced into a claim by an alpha who saw only my worth, not me. His sharp eyes narrowed. And you believe I would not have seen you? The question pierced my fragile defense. The honest answer was complex. I hadn't known what he would see, only that I feared the loss of control inherent in his claim. I feared the inevitability, I admitted, my voice strengthening slightly, fueled by the necessity of truth. The mate bond system demands obedience. It demands visibility. I watched others consumed by the politics of their claims. I chose invisibility. Marcus stared at me, his gaze dropping momentarily to my mouth, the source of the terrible revelation. I saw the complex mixture swirling in his eyes, the deep, burning resentment of the lie, and the fierce, undeniable confirmation of the bond. This was the climax, the moment where his Alpha King duty intersected with his mate instinct. He moved then, not with rage, but with a terrifying, deliberate slowness that promised permanence. He knelt, bringing his imposing frame down to my level, forcing an intimacy that stripped away all my defenses. You chose silence because you believed it was safer than the truth, he murmured, his breath warm against my cheek. But the bond, Sarah, is not something to be evaded with pantomime. It is the core of our existence. You may have convinced the world you were mute, but you could never convince me that we were not destined. His hand reached out, brushing aside the silver pendant. The mute sigil clattered lightly against my sternum. His eyes locked on mine, intense, demanding complete surrender. The greatest betrayal here, he continued, his voice dropping to a possessive growl that vibrated deep within my core, was not the deception you practiced on the pack, but the 8 years of silence you imposed between us, delaying the inevitable. He didn't touch me the way a captor touches prey. He touched me the way a claimant marks his territory, with a mixture of dominance and fundamental recognition. His fingers traced the delicate curve of my jaw, tipping my face toward him. You said you wanted to avoid being a commodity, he stated, his thumb brushing over my lower lip. But you are a necessity. You are my other half, and you fought your destiny with every fiber of your being. The weight of his claim was staggering. He was accepting the deception, folding it into the narrative of their bond, transforming my resistance into a testament to the strength of his own eventual victory. There was no anger left, only a fierce, uncompromising possessiveness that transcended mere politics or duty. The 8-year silence vow is nullified, Marcus declared, his command absolute, radiating a pure alpha dominance that left no room for doubt or further evasion. You will never need that silence again, Sarah. Your voice is yours now, but every sound you make will echo here, within Ethelgard Keep. You will speak for me, and only for me. He leaned in, his lips grazing my ear, sending a shudder of raw desire and resigned acceptance through my body. I found you in silence, but I will claim you with sound, with the fierce, demanding voice of our fate, he finished, his claim finalized not with a question, but with an imperative action. He closed the remaining distance, his kiss firm, possessive, and absolute. The culmination of the territorial review encounter, the shattering of the silent facade, and the ultimate, undeniable acceptance of the mate bond system. The deception was over. The flight had ended in the center of power, as the Alpha King's powerful arms wrapped around me, pulling me fully into his sphere of dominance. I knew my destiny was sealed. I was claimed, irrevocably, by the most powerful male in the realm, finally forced to use the voice I had so desperately protected, a voice that would now only whisper his name. My resilient, guarded life as a mute Omega was finished. My life as Marcus Julian Sterling's claimed Omega had just begun, and there would be no going back to the quiet anonymity of the Crossroads district. My voice and my allegiance were now his, demanded by a fate stronger than any lie. The contact was devastating, not only for the raw, visceral heat it ignited, but for the finality it represented. It wasn't a question, or even a negotiation. It was the ultimate, unquestioning stamp of ownership. Marcus' mouth moved against mine with a fierce hunger that demanded a response, stripping away the accumulated layers of my carefully constructed psychological defenses until all that remained was the trembling Omega beneath. I tasted the metallic edge of fate on his tongue, the potent flavor of cedar and absolute command. My hands, instinctively used to performing refined, silent dialogues, moved against his chest, clutching the thick, expensive fabric of his tunic. The struggle was brief, pointless. My body, driven by the inescapable logic of the mate bond system, yielded completely to the superior alpha presence. When he finally pulled back, he didn't move far. His gray eyes, now dark and incandescent, were fixed on my face, searching, demanding reassurance that I was fully present, fully his. I felt exposed, naked in the overwhelming light of his scrutiny. The single desperate word I had uttered, the plea that had shattered 8 years of silence, felt like a phantom limb, simultaneously awkward and terrifyingly real. "That is the sound of destiny, Sarah," he stated, his voice a low rumble that resonated through the study's heavy air. He was breathing heavily, his possessiveness still a tangible pressure between us. "Do you hear it? It is louder than any lie you could craft." I struggled to inhale, the air in Ethelgard Keep feeling thin, electrified. The reality was that he hadn't claimed me in spite of the deception, but because of it. My defiance had merely intensified his resolve, turning his suspicion into fierce, territorial confirmation. "What will happen now?" I whispered, the words still raspy, unfamiliar in their volume. They felt like stones tumbling out of my mouth after an eternity of smooth silence. He smiled then, a small, terrifying shift in the hard line of his jaw. "What happens now is the unavoidable. The deception is finished. You fought for anonymity in the Crossroads district. You found visibility in Ethelgard Keep. You will occupy the space you were always meant to hold." Marcus rose, forcing me to tilt my head back again, confirming his supreme height and authority. He picked up the mute sigil, the worn silver pendant, where it had fallen against my sternum during the kiss. He examined the metal charm, its surface dulled from years of my anxious touch, with a look of pure contempt. "This trinket," he scoffed, dropping it carelessly onto the dark wood desk where it clattered, a tiny, insignificant sound swallowed by the cavernous room. It was a childish shield. "You sought to evade the entire framework of our society, believing a symbol could negate biology and destiny. It is irrelevant now. Dispose of it." The casual dismissal of my shield felt like a physical blow. That pendant had been my entire identity, the anchor for my silent, independent life. "It wasn't childish," I defended, the sudden return of my voice granting me a painful, fleeting surge of argumentative strength. "It was necessary. You don't understand the obligations, the scrutiny. I would have been brokered, traded, a political tool for any powerful alpha seeking to bolster his rank. I refused to be reduced to my biology." Marcus walked toward the tall window, overlooking the sprawling city that contained millions of souls, yet none as singular as mine in this moment. "I am the Alpha King," he said, not as a statement of ego, but as a defining truth of the realm. "Do you honestly believe I would ever allow my mate to be reduced, to be brokered? That is precisely the arrogance and suspicion I must now eradicate, Sarah." He turned back, his expression grave, layered with the complex responsibility of his title. "You hid from duty, and you hid from me. The irony is that your attempts at anonymity only amplified your scent, your worth, and the undeniable pull of the bond. My instincts knew you were more than a silent woman in a neutral territory. They screamed that you were mine." He moved back toward me, but this time, he didn't stop to command or kiss. He merely stood, projecting an aura of absolute control that settled over me like a heavy velvet cloak. The 8-year silence vow served one purpose. It delayed your inevitable arrival here. It created 8 years of unnecessary loneliness for both of us, and that is what I cannot forgive easily. He paused, letting the weight of the missing years settle between us. I suddenly understood the depth of his fury. It wasn't just that I had lied, it was that I had robbed him of time dictated by fate. You believe you wanted freedom from the mate bond system, but the mate bond system exists to ensure stability, protection, and the correct matching of power. Your value is astronomical, Sarah. You required the greatest defense, and you chose the weakest method. He reached out, not to dominate, but to offer a startling, unlooked-for comfort. He pulled my chair back slightly, leaning down until his gaze was level with mine. "You are not a commodity. You are the Alpha Queen. And that is a responsibility you cannot evade with silence or stylized hand gestures. You will face the scrutiny, yes, but you will face it by my side. Every eye that lands upon you will be forced to acknowledge your status, not your perceived weakness." The title, Alpha Queen, felt impossible, too grand for the fearful woman who had spent years communicating with deliberate, slow movements to avoid detection. The thought of stepping into the blinding light of Ethelgard Keep's political center, the very place I had fled, sent a wave of nausea through me. "The Pax will question the claim," I whispered, realizing the depth of the political storm I had just caused. "They will question the sudden revelation, the deception. They will question nothing," Marcus cut in, his voice hardening again, radiating the lethal authority that enforced order across the realm. "My word is law, and I will tell them that I found my mate, who was unjustly hampered by a previous injury, a disability now miraculously overcome by the power of the bond." I stared at him, aghast at the swift, calculated deception he was constructing to cover my 8-year lie. He was manipulating the narrative to ensure my acceptance, using his royal prerogative to rewrite history. You would lie for me? I would control the narrative for my queen, he corrected, a subtle, cold glint in his eyes. You chose a quiet lie to protect yourself. I will choose a loud truth to protect us both. The political maneuvering has already begun, Sarah. We must establish your position before the sun fully rises. He took my hand, his palm massive and warm, completely enclosing mine. The connection was electric, binding. He didn't wait for my consent, but merely pulled me to my feet. The strength in his grip was not just physical, it was the psychological anchor of my new reality. From this moment forward, you belong entirely to Ethelgard Keep. Every detail of your life, your security, your schedule, your very location is under my absolute control. Your period of self-imposed freedom is over. You are claimed, and with that claiming comes the ultimate protection only I can offer. He led me out of the study and into the dimly lit, labyrinthine corridors of the royal seat. The silence of the keep was unlike the anonymity of the Crossroads district. This silence was heavy, oppressive, filled with the weight of unseen guards and unquestioned loyalty. My mind raced, trying to grasp the magnitude of the shift. I had traded the fear of being claimed by a random alpha for the terrifying certainty of being claimed by the Alpha King. The threat of political maneuvering remained, but now, the shield was not my fragile silence, but the unparalleled power of Marcus. We reached a set of massive, ornately carved double doors. Marcus stopped, turning to face me one last time, before crossing the threshold into what I knew would be my designated private chambers. You said you wanted to choose your own path, he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. You have found it. It is here, by my side, the path of the Alpha Queen, and it demands your voice, Sarah. Use it. Speak to me. Tell me what you desire. Now that the lie is dead, and your future is decided. I looked up at him, studying the imposing structure of his face, the sharp intelligence in his eyes, and the fierce possessiveness that now felt inextricably linked to his affection. The fear was still present, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now tempered by a strange, dizzying sense of absolute security. The world I had tried so hard to manage had finally taken charge, and the relief of surrendering to such overwhelming force was intoxicating. I desire rest, I admitted, the word sounding small and honest. Marcus' lips curved into a genuine, possessive smile. Then rest you shall have, but understand this. There will be no more silence, Sarah, ever. Your voice is the music of this keep, and I will demand to hear it, fiercely and often, for the rest of our destiny. He opened the doors, revealing a chamber of breathtaking opulence, a silent testament to my new, inescapable status. As he gently guided me over the threshold, pulling me into the warmth and scent of his domain, I finally let go of the last remnants of the resilient, mute Omega. The lie had secured 8 years of self-deception, but the truth had claimed an eternity. My life in the shadows was extinguished, replaced by the demanding, powerful light of the Alpha King's domain. The silence was broken, irrevocably, and the resounding voice of fate had won. Fuel the algorithm. Thumbs up, then subscribe.